Even as we get closer to the holidays, there's no respite for the property sector.
Well, there was a little bit of respite yesterday in the dollar junk bond market. On average, some bonds improved or gained about 2 cents on the dollar. On that comment that you just mentioned about how the government may be taking a more steady hand on the tiller in regards to loan and debt negotiations, if you will, with Shermao and some of these trust funds. And we saw Shermao actually rise as much as 11% yesterday. But the stresses are definitely still there. Obviously, as we've had this week, more companies kind of expose their weaknesses right now, whether it's Shermao or yesterday we talked about Guangzhou RNF. I mean, there's definite pressure, liquidity pressure and repayment pressure on these developers. The latest, as you mentioned at the top there, was Kaisa, which, of course, just, I can't remember how many days ago it was, that was actually a little more than a week ago, was declared a defaulter on this $400 million bond that had matured. Now we're hearing from bondholders that they have not necessarily yet been paid on 2 coupons that were due in the last few days on 2 more bonds. So again, Kaisa's in default territory. They are the 3rd biggest issuer of dollar bonds among the developers, with about $11.2 billion outstanding. So there's that with Kaisa. Still a lot of pressure on that company. Also, China Evergrande. You mentioned that. We're hearing a Chinese court has seen lawsuits piling up, 350 or thereabouts different cases claiming, no payment from China Evergrande on their liabilities to the tune of $13 billion worth of lawsuits. So that is a big, another weight on Evergrande. These things keep on piling up at a time when, Citigroup as well is saying they're turning positive. They're turning overweight on China's dollar junk bond market in 2022. Yes, there's going to be a lot of maturities coming due in January and the first part of the year. But Citigroup, and there's one reason why there was optimism in the market yesterday. One reason, though, Citigroup is saying we're overweight on the China junk bond market for 2022 as a whole.
Right, let's get more on this with our China credit editor, Rebecca Chung-Wilkins, as well. Rebecca, so Steve was telling us a little bit earlier about how the junk bond markets in China saw a little bit of an upside in the past session, but how sustainable is it, given, of course, all of the challenges that he talked about?
Well, yes, I think those sort of challenges will be the presiding theme. I think, although, of course, yes, we have seen a little bit of optimism. And in fact, we have sort of seen these sort of bouts of rebound over the last, let's say, sort of month in particular. But I think the defining characteristic has been that they've been incredibly precarious. And even when we have seen sort of prices come down, so prices come up, yields come down a little bit, those have been erased quite quickly with sort of new surprising factors, shocking investors, and kind of destabilizing things. I think the worries about Shermao are an excellent example where many investors, many institutional investors that have exposure to that name have somewhat been taken by surprise. I think there's sort of 2 key things to watch. On the one hand, the fundamentals. Are sales actually going to improve? And, after terrible 3 months of sales, it's very, very difficult to see how developers longer term are going to shore up their finances without that changing and improving quite drastically. And on the other hand, I think another key area to watch is the offshore market. So is the offshore bond market actually going to reopen for developers? And if it doesn't, it does look like the sort of wave of default that has provoked is just going to continue. And again, the Guangzhou RNF news that we had this week, the sort of debt exchange, is again, RNF is another sort of symptom of a firm who's unable to access the dollar bond market and as a result unable to roll over any of its bonds. It has an enormous amount of offshore bonds coming due through 2022 as well, along with all of the other Chinese developers. Something like $6 billion needs to be repaid.